So this is our final model for this week, and I'm hoping that you kind of enjoy the content. And so today, let's talk about review of the psychology of atheism, or rather the psychology of atheism. Now, the psychology of atheism, research in this space kind of looks at the psychological factors that contribute to the development and maintenance of an atheistic belief system, as well as the cognitive, emotional, social aspect of atheism. And so some key areas of research in the psychology of atheism is what we'll be covering today. One, we look at the cognitive elements. And so you find that some studies suggest that atheists tend to have a more analytical cognitive style, which it's sort of associated with a greater tendency to question and critically evaluate religious beliefs. And so you find someone like Penny Cook and colleagues who have done some research to kind of highlight this. On the other hand, atheists also may be more likely to engage in reflective thinking and even have a lower need for cognitive closure, which could lead them to be more open to questioning religious beliefs and dogma. And so this really is just some of the research that's been done within the cognitive space. On the other hand, we could also look at this from a personality theory perspective. And so you find that research have shown that atheists tend to sort of score higher in measures of openness to experience, and even lower on measures of agreeableness and conscientiousness compared to religious individuals. In fact, some studies have also found a negative correlation between atheism and even measures of authoritarianism and even dogmatism. And so this would suggest that some atheists may be less likely to adhere to a strict belief system and be more open to alternative viewpoints. Now, of course, there are different ways that we could look at this, right? Which might give insight as to what might be happening. On the other hand, for example, within the cognitive domain, you could see it makes sense to say that you could interpret that or conceptualize it using the dual process theory, where one could argue that people that use the overly analytical might be using their system 2, which is responsible for some of the analytical thinking process in decision making. On the other hand, it's important that we look at the social factors. Now, within this stage, there's research on social identity theory, which could help us understand this. And it simply suggests that the process of social identification with a religious group, such as, let's say, secular humanists or even atheist community, as a mere identification with those groups or association with them, can play a role in the development and even in the maintenance of an atheistic beliefs. So, but social and cultural factors, such as living in a predominantly secular society, or even experiencing negative encounters with religious institutions or individuals, can also contribute to the development of atheistic beliefs. But also, we should also be aware of the developmental factors. Now, studies have shown that religious upbringing plays a significant role in shaping an individual's religious beliefs or even the lack thereof. And so, children that are raised in non-religious household are more likely to really identify as atheists later in life. And find studies that have been done by Bankston and colleagues who kind of provide evidence for this. And so personal experiences such as exposure to scientific education or a history of religious doubt or even questioning can also really contribute to the development of atheism itself. Now, it's important that we shift a bit to look at research on atheism and mental health, which has kind of yielded some mixed results. For example, some studies have found that religious individuals report higher well-being and life satisfaction compared to atheists. I think the study was by Koenig. But also, on the other hand, others have found no significant differences in well-being between religious and not religious individuals. Also, it's important to acknowledge the interplay with, between morality and pro-social behavior, especially when we look at it from a atheist perspective. Now, studies have also shown that atheists, that non-religious people and religious individuals may have different moral foundations and values. For example, one of the arguments is that atheists, those that are non-religious may kind of prioritize individual autonomy and personal freedom, whereas religious individuals may be more likely to kind of emphasize loyalty, authority, and sanctity. Now, I think also this particular construct might be one way, because most of this research, it's based on Western perspective, because in some other non-Western perspective, you find in collectivist cultures, the emphasis might shift a bit away from the focus on autonomy. So it's interesting to ask, for those that are non-religious in such cultures, what is really the driving force behind, what will be the emphasis in those kind of contexts? What will be the emphasis? So it's interesting to see some of what factors that might be motivating this. But I wanted, most importantly, to kind of talk about this recent research by Boris, just was published last year on atheism and emotional suppression. Now, according to him, atheism, the finding shows from his research shows that atheists are more likely to suppress emotional displays compared to religious and agnostic individuals. This research was published in APA's Psychology of Religion and Spirituality last year. And also, they also found that there is no difference in the use of cognitive reappraisal as an emotional regulation strategy between atheists and other groups. So, which is interesting because other studies will argue that that atheists, or rather non-religious folks, often utilize, are more analytical than the other groups. But this study is showing that that's not the case. That there's no difference. But I think this has implications. On one hand, while acknowledging that this is merely a cross-sectional study, and at the same time, the sample group is just undergraduate students, but it does have implications. I think one implication is that the suppression of positive emotions might really hinder spiritual experiences, which make atheism more compelling. So, which makes sense, because by suppressing your emotions and cognitively making a case for yourself, it makes whatever you're saying, whatever you say you believe in, to be more compelling. On the other hand, atheists, their tendency for emotional suppression could also be perceived as untrustworthiness, which contributes to existing prejudice. So, which makes sense, because as non-religious folks, atheists cannot suppress their emotions because they're suppressing due to the untrustworthiness that they feel, and which contributes to their prejudice. That raises more questions around other things as well, that I'm sure you could use the imagination to make sense of them. But we should be aware of the limitations of the study. The sample wasn't globally representative, and the data was collected at a single point in time, mostly from undergraduate students. But I think that future research should also track changes in emotional suppression and spiritual experiences over time, and examining the impact on worldviews. And I think that these observations from this study can be framed, the observation from this particular study, I think it can be framed under the lens of emotional regulation theory. As we know, this theory posits that individuals consciously or unconsciously influence the emotion they have. Now, they do this when they have them, right? And they do this, they influence the emotion that they have. They influence when they have them and how they experience and express these emotions. And so in the context of the study by Boris, it suggests that atheists are more likely to suppress their emotion, a form of emotion regulation. And this can also influence their spiritual experiences and worldview. And so this emotional suppression thesis can sort of affect how they are perceived by others, and potentially, or how they perceive others, and potentially contributing to existing prejudice against text. But I think aspects of social identity theory can also be implicated in these findings, because social identity theory suggests that individuals derive a part of their identity from the social group that they belong to. And so in the case of a taste, their group identity might involve a tendency towards emotional suppression, which would ultimately affect their interpersonal interactions and their social perceptions. However, it's important to note that while these theories might provide some explanatory power, human beliefs and behaviors are complex, and of course they're influenced by a multitude of factors. And so these theoretical frameworks kind of provide some kind of potential explanations, but I don't think they do account for all variety, all the variability in individual experiences and beliefs. And so as we come to a conclusion, the psychology of atheism and research in this space kind of explores the cognitive, personal, social, developmental, and mental health implications or aspect of atheism. And essentially, all these frameworks and models seek to understand the factors that contribute to the development and maintenance of an atheistic belief system and their impact on individual and society. And so I'm hoping that as we've covered all this content, that it will help you make case of your writing, and especially for most of you that are doing your interviews, and you can articulate some of the findings using some of the models that you learned from this study. And I hope that it's been helpful, and I'll see you next week. And also I wanted to mention that for next week, we'll be returning back to class and doing our presentations. And also feel free to also watch the videos and the content from the class presentation for this week, which I would upload on Blackboard as well for you. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Okay? You have a blessed week. Bye.